more than 100,000 people came out in Michigan yesterday to vote uncommitted. And I must say that's 100,000 and counting. The last time I saw it was about to cross 102,000. But it was still it hadn't even hit 90 percentile as far as the reporting of the vote. So we'll see what it ends up at. Maybe it'll end up around 110, 120, something like that. As far as when the last count is in, that would be actually awesome. But let's listen to how corporate media is precisely how CNN and Dana Bash is covering this news. Let's start out there.
Publishing. Want to publish a book? We'll review your manuscript for free.
If you've written a book, Page Publishing can help you through the process. We cut.
There we go.
Uncommitted over President Joe Biden. That, of course, was the result of a protest campaign over the administration's handling of the Israel-Gaza war. The chair of the Progressive Caucus in Congress, Pramila Jayapal, told our Manu Raju that this protest was no surprise, saying, quote, "This is exactly what I warned about several months ago. The war on Gaza is a deep moral issue, and the lack of attention and empathy for this perspective from the administration is breaking apart the fragile coalition we built to elect Joe Biden in 2020. It's not just the far left. Listen to what the number 2 Senate Democrat said this morning.
I am worried. I've talked to them, and I know they feel very strongly and have a right to. The situation facing Palestinians in Gaza is horrible. It's a humanitarian disaster, and the sooner the hostilities come to an end and the sooner the relief is delivered, the sooner we're going to see some, I think, people sitting back and taking stock of what the real choices are in November.
Our panel is back now. Jeff Zeleny, you just came back from Michigan this morning, right? And I know you've got some new reporting on what's going on in the Democratic Party.
Senator Durbin talking there about needing a solution. I mean, this is an example of where there is a deep political problem, but it is likely only to be resolved by a policy solution. And this is something
that is very unusual for the establishment. They're in a unique, not a unique, what's a different word to use? They are in a position that they don't commonly find themselves in a position where a group of voters or a group of constituency is standing their ground, holding the line on a policy position and demanding the change in the policy position for the vote. Typically, i.e., for example, the Black community, which is a voting constituency, is another part of the coalition that is sorely needed, could do this same thing, but that is a group that has not chosen to hold the Democratic Party to a standard like this. But you've seen how effective it is. They've been trying to ignore this campaign, not give it the sort of framing that it deserves. And I shouldn't say campaign to ignore, because they had not ignore the uncommitted campaign, but ignore this constituency that it's upset at the policy in occupied Palestine. So let's listen to a little more. I thought this video was a little bit revealing. I thought that this segment on here was a little bit revealing some of the things they talk about in a segment, for example, how Pramila Jayapal says the lack of empathy for the pro-Palestinian position is breaking apart the Biden coalition. And I can't remember what video I have that's going to speak more to that. I think it's another CNN clip where the panelists say there's been too many times. Actually, I think it might be in here. So actually, let me let it play it. I think it's towards the end, but let me let it play some more. I think it's part of this video here.
Something that talking to a variety of Michigan Democrats during my time reporting there, one said the anger will not be resolved with meetings. It will take bold action. So they're really calling on President Biden to do something bold, to keep distancing himself from Prime Minister Netanyahu, which he's done. I mean, if you track the timeline of President Biden's own response to this since October 7th,
absolutely,
he's already heard this message. This did not come as a surprise to him. The number did. The 101,000 people. I talked to one Michigan Democrat who supports Joe Biden yesterday, and he said anything over 50,000, that could be an issue. It was twice that, 100,000. But in addition to that, this could be a floor. Another warning sign I heard from a Michigan Democrat who, again, wants President Biden to be reelected, said it took an act to go out and vote uncommitted. What about the people who didn't vote? Young.
Right. So, so think about that. The dissatisfaction number is likely to be twice, if not 3 times as high, because the people who came out and actually registered the 100,000+, those are people so motivated and discussed to actually physically come out because of fight traffic, work, and all this stuff, stand in line to vote in a primary that they know Biden is going to win. I would say there's probably at least twice as many as that amount of people who are simply saying, fuck all of this shit and I'm just staying home. So that's the number that's not showing up in this. But I would assume any of these people who are part of this campaign, they have to assume that if people are showing up saying, registering this, there has to be at least the same amount of people, if not more, who is staying home because of the same reason. That's just a logical point. But let's get back to the video.
Young people in Ann Arbor, in Lansing, across the state, the apathy and just a disinterest in this campaign, that is, in the words of this Democrat, a much more worrisome sign. So look, the warning signs are there. Former Congressman Andy Levin told me last night.
Now look at that. That's 101,108. And what's the percentage? Oh, that's 95% reporting. So I said earlier, it hadn't hit 90%. That's 95% support reporting, not supporting. If you see right above to the left of the live CNN sign, you'll see 95% right there in the bottom corner there. And what I also, actually, I want to wait for them to make the point before I counter the point.
Last night, after you interviewed him, actually, he was standing in Dearborn. He said, this could be a constructive effort. It sends a warning sign in advance to the White House. They have 8 months to sort of figure this out.
Yeah, and Leanne, I know you all have been doing extensive reporting on this, but because you mentioned Andy Levin, he was a congressman from a very well-known Democratic political family in Michigan. Listen to part of our conversation last night.
Dana, my goal here personally was to get through to the president's campaign that there is no political solution to this problem. I don't see how we can win the White House again without winning Michigan. And I don't think we can win Michigan unless the president changes course on Gaza.
Man.
And Leanne, I think you all noticed that last night, the Biden campaign put out a statement that was.
So again, that was Andy Levin. If you've been watching our reporting on this Uncommitted campaign from the beginning, you've seen many clips of Andy because he's been part of from the beginning. And understand, he is a pro vote blue no matter who sort of Democrat. That's who Andy Levin is. Let me turn this volume off here. That's who Andy Levin is. So Andy Levin is who's down on the ground in Michigan and saying, okay, this shit is so bad. We need to do this uncommitted just so people can voice their frustration and so that we can show the Democratic Party this is a real problem that requires a policy change if you want to win, because he does have Trump derangement syndrome, to be quite frank with you, Andy Levin, that is. But let's continue.
Kind of vanilla, and didn't mention uncommitted. Vanilla about winning Michigan.
Right.
That changed this morning when they saw the numbers go up, 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 up. Here's what the campaign said this morning. President Biden shares the goal of many of the folks who voted uncommitted, which is an end to violence and a just and lasting peace. That is what he is working towards. We will earn their votes between now and November.
Yeah, they are realizing, I think, after these results last night that it is a huge challenge for him. Of course, now Michigan has one of the biggest Arab American communities in the country. Pennsylvania is another state that has high percentages as well. But Michigan is, what Andy Levin said is absolutely right, that it is necessary to win for Biden or presumably Trump to be the nominee. But there's also a lot of warning signs for Donald Trump, too.
No, there's not. They're making up that up. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
I want to say that I think that Democrats have to decide who they are and what they stand for in this moment.
This is what I was talking about here.
It's not only Arab Americans in terms of a marginalized
So
group
actually,
that
let me pause so we can make sure we really zero in on this part. What is this? Because this is, I don't know her name, but she's the one who comes in and says Dems has basically treated their parts of their coalition as expendable. Hearing the cries of Medicare for all from progressives, hearing voting rights from the Black community, hearing immigrant rights from some people in the Latin community. Like they've been hearing all of these things and just kind of, who are you going to vote for? The other side? So you can't have that sort of team position, because supposedly that is a team. You can't have that sort of team position, and that having that team position long term doesn't erode your support. Eventually, some people, the Black community, go, oh no, I'm done with this shit. Eventually, some people in the Latin community are going to go, oh, I'm done with this shit. And just think about what the Biden administration is currently have been doing in the last 6 months, trying to placate the let me just call it the racist tendencies of how they view immigration, and the Democrats moving to the right on that, with willing to scrap asylum. What do they think that's going to do to their coalition? Democrats not delivering on voting rights for the Black people who do support them. I'm not in favor of that, those voting rights acts, but the Black people who do support the Democrats didn't deliver on that. Didn't deliver on minimum wage for anybody. Didn't deliver on climate for young people in the way that he promised. So you can't keep not delivering in these areas and then this coalition stays together. That's what this lady right here articulates. Let me just rewind it just a little bit and let her. It's the Black lady with the I think she has dreads or braids on.
For Donald Trump, too. And there have been throughout the entire campaign.
That's a good point.
I want to say that I think that Democrats have to decide who they are and what they stand for in this moment. It's not only Arab Americans in terms of a marginalized group that feel as though they are treated as expendable by the Democratic Party. Right now, you have, mixed families with undocumented folks, but with citizen children that are feeling alienated. You have Black voters feeling alienated as well. And I think for a long time, this is beyond President Biden. Democrats have treated some of the parts of their coalition as expendable, and they can't afford to continue to do that without really voters saying in a very loud
watch the
way
reaction
that
to what
jig is
she's
up.
saying.
You mentioned the Republicans, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that Nikki Haley is still in the race. She didn't compete at all in Michigan, and she still got, she didn't win at all, but she got a sizable amount of the vote. I had a conversation.
Now, your reaction might be the same as mine. Huh? What? Did you hear what the previous lady just said, Dana? They do this in media, I've noticed, and I saw it in another clip a couple of days ago where the person made such a devastating point specifically about the Democratic Party and or Joe Biden, and they literally go, huh? and pivot and just completely not even acknowledge what the person says and goes on a completely different track. Just right here, I'm going to rewind it for the last 15 seconds for you to see that ridiculousness one more time. Let me let her say a little bit more of the great points that she makes here. So let's start from the beginning.
and throughout the entire campaign.
That's a good point.
I want to say that I think that Democrats have to decide who they are and what they stand for in this moment. It's not only Arab Americans in terms of a marginalized group that feel as though they are treated as expendable by the Democratic Party. Right now, you have, mixed families with undocumented folks, but with citizen children that are feeling alienated. You have Black voters feeling alienated as well. And I think for a long time, this is beyond President Biden. Democrats have treated some of the parts of their coalition as expendable. And they can't afford to continue to do that without really voters saying in a very loud way that the jig is up.
Now, I'm going to rewind it here. It's something I just noticed.
President Biden. Democrats have treated some of the parts of their coalition as
Dana
expendable.
Banch's hand.
And they can't
She's
afford
clearly
to continue
getting
to
something
do that
told to her in her ear. Look, see how
really voters
she's
saying
getting
in a very
told something in
loud
her
way
ear.
that
That's
the
why
jig is
she's
up.
ready to move
You
on. They're telling her,
the Republicans,
move
and
on
I don't
from
want
this
to lose
shit.
sight of the fact that Nikki Haley.
Because it wasn't an indication for her to be ready to talk based on the person in the same studio her as she's saying. It wasn't like she was coming to so let me jump in. She's clearly hearing something in her ear to move on from the producers. That lets you know they have no capacity, they have no desire for real analysis of what's happening to be actually talked about in the public sphere. They have no real desire for that. Anytime that happens, they literally skirt away, if not just technical difficulties. Then mics start going out. We've all seen that in a few stories. So that is probably the recent story. This is the recent update. I'm going to give you some more recent updates, but what I do want to do is go to Twitter so that we can kind of go through a chronological telling of how we got to this part here, or got where we are with this uncommitted vote and what it says about the Biden administration, what it says about what's going to be happening in November for Joe Biden, and if it indicates, is this putting more pressure on the Democratic convention to switch out Joe Biden? Like, is this uncommitted vote putting pressure on Joe Biden in that way? I thought this was telling. I thought it was jarring. It's what this guy says here in the first maybe 20 seconds would be very jarring for a Democratic strategist to hear this.
Biden. Joe Biden failed the humanity. So Muslim American community, our message, yes, indeed. February 27th in Michigan, we are voting uncommitted. The devil would come and replace Joe Biden. I will vote for the devil to replace Joe Biden. We're all
That guy says, I would vote for the devil to replace Joe Biden. That's some devastated shit right there, because what is he speaking to? He's speaking to lesser of two evil. And he's saying the devil is the lesser of two evils if Joe Biden is on the other side. Devastating to any Democratic strategist to hear. We can listen to a little bit of more people speak and then we'll move on. But it's not a lot in this video we're going to cover.
We're all voting uncommitted. Yeah.
We are voting uncommitted.
All right, a lot to watch for there as Democrats upset with President Biden pushing.
So yeah, like I said, they go off on their right-wing sort of tangent on nonsense. So that's not what I'm covering here. We covered that. Now let's just go through just some reaction here and of the uncommitted vote on corporate media's different segments they've been going through. This video here is right before the vote, or before the vote tallies are in. And let's listen to this Michigan state rep. This is a Michigan state rep. So this is a Democrat. Listen to what he says here.
Some perspective now from one of the Michigan Democrats who is pushing for this uncommitted protest vote. We have with us State Representative Alabas Farhat. Alabas, thank you so much for being with us. What message are you trying to send President Biden by voting uncommitted?
Yeah, I want to make it clear that today's vote is an appeal to the White House. It is an appeal to President Biden to be the leader that we know he can, the leader that he promised the nation he would be in 2020 when he campaigned saying that he was going to restore dignity and humanity to the White House. Right now, thousands of Michiganders are watching overseas, their loved ones dying, children starving to death, and they're hearing the screams of parents who are holding their children, their lifeless children. What right now we're hoping to push the president on is secure a ceasefire now, and let's end the killing of innocent civilians overseas. Let's restore humanitarian aid, right? Let's start working towards a lasting peace process. That's the appeal of Michigan voters today when they vote uncommitted.
In recent weeks, President Biden has gone further in publicly criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu's government and his policies, calling the IDF response over the top. He also reinstalled actions against settlers in the West Bank. Obviously, you would like to see him do more. So I'm wondering what specifically you would like to see him change in his approach to the Israeli leadership.
Look, I'm really glad that you honed it in on the Israeli leadership, because that's what this is, right? The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, I think has actively worked against a lasting peace process. He's went out there and made statements saying that there can be no peace deal, or that they'd rather recover the hostages through force than through a ceasefire. The rhetoric of the Prime Minister of Israel has been damaging, I think, and quite frankly, it's led to the innocent civilians that have been murdered and killed right now. What I'd love to see from the White House is a recognition that, one, Benjamin Netanyahu is not a great actor to work with in this conflict. He is not.
So as you can see, now this, like I said, this is a Democratic state rep in Michigan, and it's sort of like a social democrat situation. Now, he's going a little bit further than the average social democrat, but as you can see, he still lands on the same establishing talking points that somehow this is Netanyahu and not the state of Israel as a whole. So even with his advocacy for Palestinians, he still has this soft spot for establishment talking points. But let's listen to some more.
Not somebody who I think has the best interest of not only the Israeli people, but the U.S. foreign policy broadly and at heart. He doesn't have that at heart. He's concerned that the moment this conflict ends, so too does his tenure as prime minister in Israel. Because ultimately, the burden falls on him for failing to one, keep Israel safe, but two, for failing to bring back the hostages in a timely manner when there's been deals and offers made to bring these hostages back home for a ceasefire.
I'm curious to get your perspective on something that Congresswoman Debbie Dingell said this morning, that President Biden has nothing to fear in Michigan's primary. Do you think enough voters will vote uncommitted that President Biden may see himself potentially lose the primary?
Oh, I mean, look, I'm talking to many of my constituents who are, who are organizers of the Michigan campaign. And, I think the president will, it's no secret, will probably win the Democratic primary today. The message, though, is that a plurality of voters, Arabs, Muslims, Christians, Gen Z voters are coming together, African-American voters are coming together in a coalition to tell the president that, hey, we want to see you call for the ceasefire. We want to see our White House reflect the values that we know it should reflect. I think that's the bigger message today. I don't think the stated goal of the Listen to Michigan campaign or any of these campaigns was to see the president lose the primary.
Okay.
So you heard that directly from one of the people involved. That's not the goal of the uncommitted campaign for him to lose the White House. The goal is just to send a message. So, and you just heard it. Let's go to Claire McCaskill. This is a former rep of Nick, RBN brother Nick. Let's see her take. And this is when the uncommitted count was only at 16,000, approaching 17,000. We all know it's already reached over 100,000. Let's see her take as it's growing.
But also, Chris, we have to remember, I mean, let's look at the Ann Arbor numbers. Joe Biden didn't win Ann Arbor. Bernie Sanders won Ann Arbor.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So some of these areas have never been Biden country. They have been really many more people that were further left and didn't like the idea of a moderate carrying the flag of our party.
Yeah.
If you're the Democrat, if you're the elites.
So the super moderate, the one who's so moderate that she moved right in her last campaign to act like she was a Trumper for Trump, if you recall that. She's saying these people who came out and uncommitted in these uncommitted areas, because these are college towns. A lot of these towns are college towns. University of Michigan, for example. These are further left towns. They were never with a moderate.
The Democratic Party. If you're the Biden White House, how concerned are you really about this faction of uncommitted voters staying home in November?
Well, I think there's a danger on both sides here that people are going to stay home. I think you've got traditional Republicans that no way.
They're trying so hard to intertwine Trump in with this. It's so pitiful.
They will vote for Joe Biden. In no way they will vote for Donald Trump. So there's going to be some people that are going to hold their nose and vote. And then there's going to be people that just stay home. The question is, will the Biden campaign be able, and by the way, there are no elites in our party. Alex.
Yes, sorry.
No elites.
She said that earlier and she corrected it 1 minute in. She asked this question in the beginning where she referred to the Democratic leadership as the elites. Your propaganda mind barely clicked on a minute after she said that shit to correct it.
The term doesn't exist, actually.
I know you didn't mean that.
That doesn't exist.
But the question is, can Biden draw the kind of contrast around some issues like guns and abortion and, frankly, autocracy and what Trump is saying he's going to do? I mean, he's going to tear up
dictator on day one.
And
so the moderate in Claire McCaskill, she basically is saying, forget these young people, these
but also,
people
Chris,
of
we
color,
have to
all
remember,
these
I mean,
people who are pro-Palestinian. You need to go after moderates. So go after abortion, start going after gun rights, do all these other things. You're not getting these people. Astonishing. All right, let's move on to the next video. This one is the sister of Rashida Tlaib. This is the person, the director, the person who was actually running Listen to Michigan, the campaign, the Uncommitted campaign. This is the top person who was running it, who happens to be Rashida Tlaib's sister.
First of all, I wonder what your reaction to tonight's turnout is. And did you send the message that you were hoping to send to President Biden?
I mean, we are just, overwhelmed by the fact that we were able to triple our margin of victory of the original 10,000 votes that we were hoping to leverage to send a clear and strong message to President Joe Biden and his administration and the Democratic Party that we needed a permanent ceasefire now to save as many Palestinian lives as possible.
You know, Layla, President Biden, as you know, in recent days has said that Israel's response in Gaza has been, quoting him, over the top. He said just yesterday that he's hoping for a ceasefire by the end of this weekend. What more do you need to hear from him specifically to go from uncommitted to committed to voting for him? Or is the concern that all of this is lip service during an election year?
Yeah, we need more than just nice words and hope. We need a permanent ceasefire right now.
You know, you at different times with the New York Times, you had mentioned this.
Right,
you said the very bare minimum that Biden needs to do to get the vote is to completely overhaul America's relationship with Israel, demand a permanent end to hostilities, and end American military aid to Israel, at least as long as its war in Gaza drags on.
Now, this interview, let me just give you an update. You see down there at the bottom, the ticker, this is when the count for uncommitted was at 44,000. 43,732 will run up to 44,000. So that's when this interview took place. So clearly it went past the 20,000. Now it surpassed double the normal amount. They have no idea it's going to reach 100,000. and this is the interview that is taking place. She's mentioning the demands, and I'll rewind it just a little bit so you can hear again the list of demands.
Nice words and hope. We need a permanent ceasefire right now.
You know, you at different times with the New York Times, you had mentioned this, and you said that the very bare minimum that Biden needs to do to get the vote is to completely overhaul America's relationship with Israel, demand a permanent end to hostilities, and end American military aid to Israel, at least as long as its war in Gaza drags on. Do you think that he would likely try to meet those expectations, or are there some concessions electorally that you would see?
I think if Joe Biden wants to avoid alienating his core base and his core constituency, he will listen to the uncommitted vote now and realize that he is going to be at risk come November for essentially handing the White House over to Trump. And he's going to have to be accountable to that. We voted. Michiganders used their ballot box as a humanitarian vote, as a protest vote, to demand that our government and our president call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and end the military funding of our American taxpayer dollars, commit a genocide in 2024.
Help me follow this thread in terms of what would be the next frontier. Let's assume that he does not meet the expectations as you've laid out or what you have just described. Does that mean that the supporters of your particular uncommitted movement are they going to stay home? Will they vote for Donald Trump?
Well, what I can say is that the uncommitted voters are not going to be voting in a monolith. They are going to have to vote their conscience. There are going to be groups, voters within this movement that already feel deeply betrayed by Biden and his administration for the fact that Muslim Americans and Arab Americans have been directly affected by Israel's aggression and collective punishment of Palestinians. And not only that, as Democrats, we feel betrayed because why are we risking our democracy to align ourselves with someone like Netanyahu and his right-wing government?
You know, the idea, and you are correct to describe the absence of a monolith when you're talking about any voting bloc that people often will look to. I'll be curious to see what ultimately will be the decision of those voters voting their conscience, voting what they want.
You notice what she zeroed in on? That's how you know the person has been doing corporate propaganda for a long time. They know what to zero in on from the answer, because that's something you can't prepare for. You can't prepare for what your guess's answer going to be. But when you're a good propagandist, you know what to zero in on in seconds of what the person is saying. And what she zeroed in on was the monolith thing, because what she wants to zero in on is that all you jackasses that's voting, you guys are not a monolith because some of you are going to be coming home to vote for Joe Biden regardless. That's what she's trying to zero in on here. Let's listen to the rest of this.
I want to mention that President Biden just released a statement thanking Michigan, but did not mention the uncommitteds. What's your response?
I think that is negligent on behalf of the president to, once again, alienate the voices of his core constituency, largely who put him in the White House in 2020, because this community largely supported Biden based on the promises that he made during his campaign trail. And we know that Trump is not a friend to our community. And we know that he is not a friend to the anti-war, pro-ceasefire community. But right now, we are appealing to Joe Biden as our president to act now before he risks losing his core constituency come November.
But I want to focus on that. What does that mean to lose the core constituency? Does that mean that although you just said that...
You see how she has to pull out of this young lady, Rashida Tlaib's sister. Let me get her actual name here. Is it on the screen? I don't see it on the screen. She has to pull out, well, what are you going to do if they don't? This reluctancy to answer that is a sign, is a trait of a social democrat, because they're not really trying to tear this shit down, and they're not really trying to tip their hand, or she's not really trying to tip their hand. They're actually just going to vote for him. But if it was somebody more radical, like an RBN, this is the first question I want to answer. Oh, we're not going to come out and vote for him. That's what's going to happen. If he doesn't change course, we hope that the 100,000 people will stay home. That should be your answer. That's the answer they need to hear. But because this is really a social democrat sort of project, one, that's not their strategy, and two, that's it. There's not their strategy. I don't need to give a second reason.
Your constituency knows that Donald Trump is not a friend to the causes that you describe. Does that mean that the couch is now the third party candidate?
That means that we need to save as many Palestinian Israeli lives as possible, and that
she included the Israeli
this
lives.
is a humanitarian vote. This is beyond politics. This is within the ceasefire movement, and we use our ballot box as a protest vote in order to save as many lives as possible, and to end this unchecked and unconditional funding that the United States provides to Israel to commit genocide using American taxpayer dollars.
The signal and the message that's being sent to President Biden, I do wonder if, knowing that he has not mentioned the constituency of Uncommitted, whether the message has been received. But what about Donald Trump, who obviously is also looking at this, wondering if this will inure to his benefit at this point in time?
I don't have that much
The
faith that she's gonna
policies
answer
of Donald Trump that he has professed and articulated, are those an improvement to what the Biden administration is doing now?
Like I said, I can't answer to every voter who voted uncommitted today, but what I can say is we use the primary as a way to tell Joe Biden and his administration what we needed right now. We are not focused right now what's going to happen in November, but what we do know is that voters are going to vote their conscience. And I don't know if voters will be able to pull their support behind a president that is complicit in a genocide. And as far as Trump, I really, I can't answer to every uncommitted voter. But what I do know is that we don't expect our voters in Michigan to stay at home. We do expect and we encourage our voters to come out and vote. And there are plenty of important races that are going to be taking place in November besides the presidential election.
Very true. Thank you so much. Clearly,
what social democrats don't understand, you can make this such a better, more stronger appeal argument if you would just come off of this patty cake nice shit that you want to still do with the establishment and say what you want to say. No, we don't care if Trump gets in office. What's the difference, tangible difference to us? A ban or a genocide? What's the difference? Social democrats don't want to say that. But anyway, let's move on to the next part here, and you can see where Williamson gets 15,000 votes here, and Phillips is at 14,000, as you can see. Uncommitted 65,000. So I can't remember the final number that they got. Yeah. All right, so let's listen to this part here. This is another important conversation you want to break down. Case Study QB just had over the last several days, just been pulling all of these clips about Uncommitted because the primary happened yesterday.
What would have been more concerning is if these voters voted for Dean Phillips. Now, if these voters had voted for Dean Phillips, there would be a fire alarm inside the White House right now, and everybody would be out of that building, and they'd be out in the campaign making this thing.
So this is what's called spin. This is a Democratic strategist. A Democratic strategist understands, even if they're not currently working for a Democrat as a strategist or working in that capacity in that manner, at any point, they can be called up out of the minor leagues. So knowing this is the reason why Democratic strategists, don't matter if they're in their 5th year as a Democratic strategist or a 5th year, they're always using this. They always stand in line with the talking points because they never know when they're going to be pulled off the bench and pulled back into the game. Because he was part of a administration, I think the Obama administration, and now he's just floating around giving his opinions. But the opinions always stay in lockstep with the establishment. And this one is not any different of what he's saying right here. I'll rewind it and let it play again with that prefix.
What would have been more concerning is if these voters voted for Dean Phillips. Now, if these voters had voted for Dean Phillips, there would be a fire alarm inside the White House.
So if the same amount of people voted for Dean Phillips, now it would be a fire alarm. Who believe? Let's let him just finish
Right now, and everybody would be out of that building, and they'd be out in the campaign making this thing happen.
And look, I'll let you jump in definitely, but Donald Trump right now is battling back Nikki Haley, by 20, 30 points. Joe Biden is still winning by a very comfortable margin, and to Jamal's point, Dean Phillips, the guy who's actually running against him, can't get beyond 5%.
It is amazing that these Negroes, and I'm going to say Negroes because that's what Abby Martin is being right now, a Negro servant. Because to pretend and to have this assessment of the Democratic primary when you know damn well that the Democratic primary is rigged, the DNC shut down the primary, you know this. There is no debate, but you want to pretend like, what good is it to boast about a win that was handed to you? How are you standing on as if that's a good thing, as if this proves some sort of strength when you rigged your win? The win is being rigged. So to compare the Democrats' rigged primary to the Republican primary where Donald Trump is demolishing Haley fair and square is just preposterous and disingenuous to their audience.
Against him can't get beyond 5%.
Right, and that's not going to change. And to Jamal saying this is a low risk protest, it is. Look, I think this is not exactly a profiling courage when you're encouraging people to go out and vote uncommitted in a primary. Now, if they really wanted to send the message to Joe Biden, they would take this all the way through November and say that we're going to do a protest vote or sit on the couch in November. They're not going to do that, and she mentioned that in her conversation with Laura. But if
so, the Republican strategist just called all of y'all out. She said, you guys are fucking bullshitting here. You guys are fucking voting uncommitted when that shit don't matter at all. If show me you got backbone and do it in November. And she's spot on. This is one of the times I absolutely agree with this particular point from this Republican strategist. Now, she's going to go on and say some nonsense after this, but I do agree with this point. Prove that you're standing with the Palestinians in November.
If they were to carry this through November, this would be a huge concern for Joe Biden. Look, those numbers we're seeing right now, 46,000 Michigan people voted uncommitted. That's a significant number. In the 2020 election, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump by around 150,000. In 2016, Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump by around 10,000. So 10,000 votes could sway the difference. And if these uncommitted voters keep this passion going through to November, it could be a huge warning sign and a big problem for Joe Biden. I'm not certain they're going to do so, but we heard also from Debbie Dingell, Congresswoman from Michigan earlier. She has been sounding the alarm to this administration for quite some time. We have to address the situation. The Arab Muslim community in Michigan is crying out for this. And the younger community in Michigan is doing so as well. And if he is going to really address this situation, he needs to do something much more serious than throwing out a possibility of a ceasefire in an ice cream shop. It must be much more organized, and it has to include a ceasefire and releasing the hostages.
Yeah, I mean, what happens on the ground is incredibly consequential. Worth noting, though, Debbie Dingell has been sounding the alarm even before this. So it could be issues compounded on one another. Everyone stick around.